Virgo, I want to say something before the wow and before everything that follows it. That is the actual content of this message. Because the wow needs context to be received correctly as what it actually is, rather than as the dramatic opening of a reading that then fails to justify the wow it announced itself with. In the first line, the wow is earned. In this reading, not performed, and the thing that earns it is not only the love that is being described, though that is significant, and I will describe it fully in everything that follows. The wow is earned because of who the person is, who is in love with you, and because of the specific and particular form their love takes, which is not the ordinary form of someone developing feelings in the gradual and expected way of two people spending time together and arriving after sufficient exposure at the place of feeling. That exposure tends to produce between people who are compatible and who have had enough time to discover the compatibility. The form this love takes is different from that. And the difference is the wow. Welcome, Virgo. And let me tell you, everything you are not going to expect this is in the title. And I want to explain why before I describe the love itself, because the not expecting it is part of what makes the message necessary, rather than simply the confirmation of something you already know and have been allowing yourself to feel in the private and hopeful interior of someone who has not yet received the confirmation. That makes the feeling safe to name to anyone, including themselves. You are not expecting this because of the particular Virgo way of managing expectations in the direction of accuracy rather than in the direction of hope, when hope and accuracy are in tension with each other. In the particular situation that this reading is about, the Virgo management of expectations in the direction of accuracy has been producing a certain reading of this person and their feelings. That is based on the available evidence in the visible and external form of what you can directly observe about what they feel and how they feel it and how consistently they feel it. In the evidence you have access to, which has been telling you one thing, while the invisible dimension of what they actually feel has been another thing entirely. The Virgo reading of the visible evidence has been accurate as far as it goes. The visible evidence does say what you have read it as saying, but the visible evidence is not the full picture, and what the full picture contains is what you were not expecting and what the wow is about. And what I am going to describe now in the full and specific form that the full picture deserves. This person is in love with you, not in the beginning and uncertain form of someone who has recently noticed feelings and is still assessing whether the feelings are real or sustainable or something to act on rather than something to manage back into. The ordinary form of appreciation or admiration or interest that is less demanding and less exposing than the full form of love in the full and established form of someone who knows what they feel, has known for some time, and who is now at the place in the development of the feeling where the knowing has solidified into something that cannot be assessed or managed back into something smaller or less demanding or more comfortable for the person feeling it because it has become in the solidified form it is now in simply what it is without available alternatives. That would reduce it to something more manageable. They are in love with you in the full and irresistible form of something that no longer has. The available alternative of being something other than what it is. That is the wow. I want to describe who this person is. In the energy terms, that will allow you to identify them with your full knowledge of your actual orbit rather than only the general description that I can offer from the reading of the energy. This person is someone who is not, in the ordinary way of things, someone you would have identified as likely to be in love with you before this reading gave you access to what the full picture contains about the invisible dimension of their feeling. They present in the ordinary way in most of the interactions you have with them in the direct and visible form of someone whose feeling is not the dominant feature of how they present to you. In the interactions that are available to you as the evidence base for your reading of the situation, but the feeling is the dominant feature of their interior experience of you and of every interaction they have with you from the inside of the feeling that the interactions happen inside of for them, even when the feeling is not visible to you in the interactions themselves, because they are managing the visibility of it for reasons I will describe in a moment. The feeling shapes everything about how they experience being around you or being in contact with you or thinking about you, which they do more than you know in the particular and sustained form of someone who thinks about another person when they have not chosen to, because the thinking happens on its own without being directed there by any deliberate act of the person doing the thinking. You return to their thoughts without being invited back because you were never fully absent from the space where the thinking happens in the private and interior form of someone who carries you with them. In the way that people carry the things and the people that they love without always knowing they are doing the carrying, because the carrying has become so habitual that it no longer registers as something being done, but simply as part of the interior landscape of who they are with you in it. Always. I want to describe more specifically what the experience of being in love with you is, like, for them, from the inside of the experience. Because I think the specificity of this will help you understand not just that they love you, but what the loving you actually is in the daily and interior form that it takes for them in the period of the invisible holding that has preceded this reading. The experience of being in love with you for this specific person is the experience of someone who has access to the fullest version of themselves when they are thinking about you, or in your presence, or in any state of awareness of you that the ordinary day provides. You expand them in the specific and recognizable form of a person who feels more fully themselves in certain presences and less fully themselves in others. Your presence and the awareness of you expands them into the fuller version rather than the contracted version that some presences produce in the particular way of someone who finds in the thought of you or in your actual presence the specific and recognizable sense of being the version of themselves that they most want to be. That expansion is one of the ways that this love is different from ordinary feeling. And one of the ways it has been irresistible to the person feeling it in the form I have been describing, because the expansion does not diminish in the holding. It is present every time they think of you in the full form of the expansion it produces, rather than fading, as exposures to the same stimulus usually produce fading in the response they provoke over time and with repetition of what they feel, because the managing is part of the story. And the reason for the managing is important context for understanding the full picture of what is happening in them and why the love has been in the invisible dimension rather than in the visible one, where it would have been apparent to you and would not have required this reading to make it accessible to your awareness. They are managing the visibility because they are afraid in the specific and recognizable form of someone who is afraid of what the full visibility of the love would produce in the dynamic between you and in their own situation, and in the possibility that you might not feel what they feel in the equivalent form or in any form. That would make the full visibility of the love worth the risk it would require to bring it into the open. The fear is about the asymmetry, the specific and uncomfortable position of someone who knows that they feel more than they know the other person feels, and who cannot know whether what the other person feels is in the same direction and the same form as what they feel, without the risk of making the love visible and discovering that the asymmetry is real and that the love is not returned in the equivalent form that the risk of making it visible was hoping it would be. So the love remains invisible in the managed form of someone who is present enough to maintain the connection that the love cannot survive the loss of, but not so present that the love becomes visible and requires the risk of making what is felt known to the person it is felt about. This is the tightrope they walk between you and the love every time they are in contact with you or in your presence, or simply thinking about you in the interior form of the thought that returns without invitation, and that produces the love in the full and irresistible form. Every time, without diminishing or becoming smaller, in the way that feelings sometimes become smaller over time when they are not expressed and when the thing they are about is not the continuous object of their attention. This love does not become smaller, and the not expressing it does not reduce it. It accumulates in the particular form of love that grows in the holding rather than diminishing, as most held things eventually do. I want to speak now specifically to you, Virgo, about what this means for you and what you do with the knowing of it, because the knowing changes something in how you navigate the connection between you and this person going forward. Now that the invisible dimension has been made visible to you by this reading, the first thing I want to say is about your own feelings, because I have been describing their love at length, and I have not yet asked what you feel in the direction of this person who is in love with you in the full and irresistible form that I have been describing. What do you feel when you are honest with yourself in the quiet and private form of someone who is not managing their own feeling into the accurate form that the evidence supports, but who is simply in the feeling without the management for a moment that this question is creating space for? Whatever you feel in that unmanaged moment is the truth that this reading is asking you to be honest about, not with anyone else, not yet, but with yourself in the specific form of the honest answer to the question of what you feel about the person who is in love with you in the full and irresistible form that has been invisible to you until this reading made it visible. The Virgo will try to manage the feeling into the accurate form based on available evidence before the feeling has had the chance to be fully felt and fully known. In the unmanaged form, that is the only form from which an accurate understanding of what the feeling actually is can eventually be reached. Feel first, Virgo, manage later. If the managing is necessary, which, from the energy I am reading, it may not be The second thing I want to say is about the space between you and this person and what happens there now that you know what the invisible dimension of that space actually contains. The space has been carrying more than either of you was making visible in it. They were not making their love visible for the reasons I described, and you were not making whatever you feel visible either for the Virgo reasons of managing in the direction of accuracy rather than in the direction of expression. The space between two people who are both holding back for their own reasons can feel empty or stalled or like the connection is not developing in the direction that both of them privately wanted to develop, but that neither of them has yet moved toward in the visible form that the development would require to actually happen rather than remain potential in the invisible dimension of what both of them are holding in the space between what the space between you actually holds is more than the space has been showing, and the more that it holds is the love that is in it from their side in the full and irresistible form that I have been describing, and from your side, whatever you hold, that the unmanaged moment of the question I just asked revealed in the private and honest form that the Virgo allows itself to feel when the managing has been briefly suspended for the purpose of knowing what the feeling actually is. Before the managing arrives to shape it into the accurate form that the management specializes in, the space between you is not what it looks like from inside. It is fuller than it looks in the invisible and unspoken form of two people who are both holding more than the space has been showing for the duration of the holding. Virgo, I want to close by naming something that I think you need to hear in the most direct form available to someone who has been in the managed version of whatever this connection is for long enough that the managed version has started to feel like the only available version. Someone is in love with you in the full and irresistible form of love that does not become smaller in the holding, but accumulates, and that has been present in the invisible dimension of every interaction you have had with them from the beginning of the feeling, which was not recently. And the question that this reading is really asking is not about them. It is about you and what you do with the knowing now that the invisible dimension has been made visible to you. In the form this reading has made it visible in, you did not expect this. No. But now that you know it, what happens next in the space between you and the person who has been carrying the full and irresistible form of this love in the invisible dimension for long enough that it has become simply what it is without available alternatives. That is yours to decide. Virgo, from the honest place, that the unmanaged moment of the feeling question just opened before the managing arrived to shape it. What do you feel from inside the honest place that this reading just created? That is the question that matters most now that the wow has been delivered and the invisible has been made visible, and the love that was always there in the space between you is now known to you in the full and complete form of something that deserves a full and complete response from the person it has been for all along